India and Mexico: the effects of colonization on contemporary politics. Throughout human history, stronger powers have sought to dominate weaker powers for a variety of reasons. Both India and Mexico were colonized for economic reasons, and their colonization would have a tremendous impact on their post-independent politics. This essay will first analyze the colonial history of both India and Mexico with a feature in colonial economic policies, then investigate the independent history of both states with a feature in independent economic policies, and finally determine the effect of colonialism on the politics of the independent India and Mexico. The history of colonial India can be broken down into 5 major events. In 1857, Indian nationals failed to overthrow the British East India Trading Company, and following the rebellion, power changed from the East India Trading Company to the British Crown. In 1885, the Indian National Congress was formed, which would become the stepping stone for many national leaders, including Jinnah and Gandhi. Further, the Indian National Congress would become the foundation to India's post-independent legislative branch. In 1931, the Round Table Conferences were held and saw the creation of a federal constitution, a system with many similarities in post-independent India. In 1935, the Government of India Act was initiated. This was important because India's own constitution was a revised version of the Government of India Act. Finally, in 1947, the Indian subcontinent was divided into India and Pakistan, and both achieved independence.
In 1521, the Spaniards conquered the Aztecs and created New Spain. A new government was administered, and the Council of Indies was created. The council was divided into regions and a chain of command. Governorates closely dealt with each region and reported back to audiences who made decisions over each region in the council. The Catholic Church also played a large role in colonialism. Ministers preached the Catholic faith and, with the help of the Bible, taught Spanish to the natives. As society progressed, social classes emerged. Whites, Europeans and North Americans, were the top class. Castros, the middle class, and the native people were the lower class. The only place where they all had equal opportunity was within the Catholic Church, where anyone could receive equal education and service benefits.
Colonial India's economic policies can be broken down into those beneficial for Indians and those destructive for Indians. Those beneficial for Indians include railways, communications, industry, law, health, education, and politics. Those destructive for Indians are: first, due to religious divisions, unity was never achieved, effectively demonstrated in the destructiveness of partition. Second, the legal system was led by rulers of the people rather than servants of the people. And third, India itself became an export market for the British, forcing millions to become dependent on foreign powers and their markets.
Once New Spain was created, it was highly in debt. Encomiendas were created as a reward for land and labor, and unfortunately, like most colonies, the native people were subjected to exploitation. The upper class lived off the lower class's land and food. In doing so, forced labor existed, in which the lower class worked 45 days longer with no extra pay. They were also subjected to mining long hours and in harsh conditions. The dual economy of farming and mining helped overseas trade develop, and all of Mexico's products were sent overseas to mainly benefit Spain. In comparing the colonial economic policies of Mexico and India, there are many similarities and differences. As for the similarities, both colonies were exploited by their colonizer and depleted of their resources. Colonizers also created foreign economies in which the goods that the farmers produced would be exported and not used within their own villages. Colonizers also created wealth in their own land and unstable economies in the colonies. As for the differences, Spain did little to advance Mexico's society and left Mexican citizens to fend for themselves. In India, Britain instilled new ideas and technologies and helped create a 5-year plan for Indian citizens.
India's contemporary economic policy initially consisted of heavy central planning and government involvement, and it continues to follow this trend today. How they did this was they utilized 5-year plans to create very reactive economic policies, starting in 1951 and moving all the way to present day. Immediate issues that India, as a new outgoing nation, had to deal with were they had immense dependence on foreign aid, they had problems with unequal distribution of resources, and they had problems in terms of industrial development across the entire country.
Mexico was left in economic ruin after they gained their independence from Spain. Therefore, it took several years for them to become economically stable again. The most effective economic policies were implemented in the mid-1900s. In order to become stable, they needed the help of other countries, which is why they signed treaties such as NAFTA and GATT. They also redistributed land to workers and peasants and passed treaties making it easier to export goods, which helped boost their economy drastically. Mexico's country is still changing, so they continue to implement economic policies today.
India and Mexico were both countries that were left initially dependent on foreign aid. India, as a result, decided that they were going to have heavy central government power involved in the economic policies, whereas Mexico initially had heavy government involvement, but later on restricted its own involvement. India's economic policies were very reactive policies through 5-year plans that changed every 5 years reacting to the country's needs, whereas Mexico's were very initially implemented in the mid-1900s and have been very static ever since. India's heavy government involvement is a difference from Mexico in that Mexico joined NAFTA, whereas India had tariffs and very protectionist economic policies. Modern-day Indian government was formed as a constitutional republic in 1950, where everyone had the right to vote, and it was formed as a secular, non-religious government. Its legislature is composed of a bicameral Westminster or English-style government consisting of 2 houses. There's the upper house, or the Rajya Sabha, which is appointed by state legislatures indirectly, and then it's the Lok Sabha, the lower house, which is directly elected. The Lok Sabha actually has de facto power due to its ability to veto the Rajya Sabha in joint sessions of Congress. The President of India is directly elected, but holds a ceremonial position, and his job is to appoint the Prime Minister.
Mexico's contemporary government was established in 1917 as a federal republic. They modeled their government after America, having a single executive, the president, a bicameral legislature, and a system of checks and balances to limit the power of each branch of government. Their constitution lays out the government structure as well as rights of the citizens. Although it seems as if Mexico is a stable government, there is a lot of corruption in the country. They still continue to struggle to become a strong, stable democracy. India and Mexico were both influenced by their colonizers, but in different ways. While India adapted Britain's form of government, Mexico adapted an entirely different form of government than Spain. While India is a parliamentary democracy, Mexico is a federal republic. India has a dual executive with a prime minister and a president, while Mexico has a single executive, the president. However, both countries have a bicameral legislature where the lower houses in both countries have the majority of the power. Lastly, they both have a 3-tiered judiciary. As you can see, India and Mexico have many similarities and differences within their countries.
Throughout the colonial history of India and Mexico, the colonizing powers of Britain and Spain effectively drained much of the economic wealth from the colonies using multiple economic policies. It is these policies that would shape the economies of independent India and Mexico, economies extremely dependent on foreign trade and export. Colonialization not only shaped the economies of the post-independent states, but also the politics themselves. India's politics are extremely similar to those found in post-World War II Britain because India achieved independence peacefully, and Britain had slowly given Indians a voice in politics during the British Raj. Mexico's politics were extremely different from Spain because Spain had not given concessions to the Mexicans, and Mexico had to fight a violent war to achieve independence. Therefore, due to the colonial economic history of India and Mexico, both states were highly dependent on foreigners and achieved little economic wealth, forcing their respective governments to take control of the economy after achieving independence, while the colonial political history of India and Mexico determined how the states' respective contemporary politics would be set up, akin or distinct from their colonizer.